You're listening to The Rule of Law, the educational podcast sponsored by All Rise, where we focus on the intersection of law, technology, and storytelling. And now, here's your host, Lauren Round.
Welcome to Rule of Law. In today's episode, we sit down with Zack, Glaser, legal technology advisor at the Lawyerist. We discuss transitioning from practicing law to legal tech, common technology gaps in law firms, and how technology is impacting lawyer burnout. Zack, welcome to the podcast. Where are you recording from?
I am out of rainy Memphis right now.
Amazing. Is it rainy all the time there? I've only been to Memphis one time. I don't know a bunch about Memphis.
No, it's usually hot and muggy here, but it is it's pretty dreary out right now. But yeah, it's a nice place to be generally.
Okay, good. Well, welcome. We are happy to have you, and we always start the show with an icebreaker. So, wanted to ask, I know that you, outside of work world, are into building stuff around the yard, around the house. So, tell us about something cool that you've built recently.
Oh, that's fun. When my wife and I lived in South Dakota during COVID, I built a trebuchet in the backyard, which is, I guess, a French catapult. It's there were no sieges or anything that we were doing, but we were just launching pumpkins into the back 600 something acres, and it was just, I mean, how many times do you get the opportunity to just go outside, grab a bunch of 2x4s and build a weird medieval weapon?
That sounds like such a COVID thing to do. Just right. Anything was on the table. That's amazing.
Right.
All right. I wish I had that part of my brain activated too. Whenever I want to build something or I need something, I'm just on TaskRabbit or Angie's List or something, getting someone else to do it. But that works. At least I have that available to me.
Right. That means, sometimes it's not worth your time.
True.
We can, what is it that Carl Sagan says, that if you want to invent something first, if you want to make an apple pie first, you have to invent the universe. You can always abstract down to doing everything, but if you're designing the thing that you want and then having somebody from TaskRabbit come and do it, great.
Yeah, 100%. I always just tell myself I'm supporting someone else's business, but really I'm just being lazy, but that's what I'm going with. So
you're doing better things with your time.
Yes, exactly. I like that reframing. All right. Well, before we dive in, if you wouldn't mind just, the basics, telling us a little bit about you, your background, and your journey to the Lawyerist.
Yeah. So I'm Zack Glaser. I am a licensed attorney in Tennessee. Have been licensed since, I guess, 2011 at this point, which feels like way too long for all of this. I practiced law with my father for about 7 years or so, doing kind of high volume medical debt collection in Tennessee. And that lends itself, as you can imagine, to a lot of automation. If you want to do debt collection in a way that allows you to be human to people, that allows you to really interact with people that are on the other side and be present with them, you have to make the other things that aren't the face-to-face stuff, you have to make those things go really fast. And so I automated a ton of stuff in my office, and after a while realized that I'd rather build the machine than run the machine. And so I stepped out of kind of day-to-day practice of that, started helping attorneys that I knew add technology and automation into their practices, started a blog and website called Tech for Lawyers, and was in the middle of that when COVID hit, and I just kind of found Lawyerist as a larger microphone. There's different ways that you can help people, that you can help lawyers with technology. I was running Cat5 cable in a legal, library, in the law library downtown. And, you can do kind of boots on the ground stuff, or you can help people help themselves. And so Lawyerist is more of a write articles, do podcasts, talk to people about the concepts of legal tech, as opposed to, actually setting up somebody's computer.
Awesome. Well, I want to go back for just a minute on sort of that transition that you mentioned from law to kind of an adjacent industry, because we hear a lot about, lawyer burnout is real, practicing law long term isn't really for everyone. I mean, just because you went to law school doesn't mean that practicing law forever is going to work out. But
Right.
it's my impression that a lot of attorneys are either scared to make a switch or they don't really know where to start. So tell us a little bit more about that transition, like how you went about it and anything that you might tell other lawyers who are considering switching.
Oh, that's a great question. Because I actually run across that question on Reddit a lot. Where it's like I really want to get into legal technology, and that's great. I think more good people need to be. Not that there's not enough good people in legal technology, but it's a growing space. I looked up while I was practicing law and realized that I didn't have any hobbies, any things that were non-competitive that I enjoyed doing. So I ran, I would run 5Ks and things like that. And I would play adult soccer, playing the adult soccer leagues because I ran and played soccer in college. But I didn't have anything that was non-competitive, that was like, blacksmithing or something like that. And I actually took a little bit of time off. My wife is an attorney, and she and I talked, and we were able to kind of set up our life in a way where I like fundamentally just took time off and started exploring things that I liked to do. And I wound up going down kind of a programming, learning more about programming, creating websites, creating, various applications and stuff like that, going down that path and just exploring. Just free form exploring what it was. I took a lot of online classes. I read a ton. I talked to a ton of people. I went to various meetups and things like that, and just kind of let my brain figure out what it was that was fun. And programming, tinkering, things like that were that for me. It kind of reopened a side that I had when I was in like middle school and high school. We had TI-84 calculators, TI-82 calculators, and when I was in middle school, and they were these like super cool, fancy calculators that could actually like run programs. And when I was in 7th grade, I had a team of kids working with me on an interactive baseball game on the calculators, and you have to hook the calculators up, and one kid was working on pitches, another kid was working on all the hits that you could have, and I was going through and figuring out saves and things like that. And I remembered while I was going down this path later in life that I liked that. It was awesome. I would sit there in class and just be like playing on my calculator, but I'd be programming something instead of like playing a game. And so I just kind of kept exploring this aspect of myself that I had almost lost. And I think that's the thing, is just, I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know what it was going to be. I could have very well gotten into, hiking or something, but it went down this path. And as I just kind of like leaned into it, it leaned back in, I guess,
Yeah. And I think a lot of people think, and rightly so, that our society isn't really set up in a way that enables people to kind of take time off and explore. But I mean, it just goes to show that, if you're willing to make a sacrifice, you can kind of revisit that. And I encourage more people to do that, because I think people get trapped in their industry, whether it's legal or not. And it's important to kind of reevaluate whether you have already gone to law school, you're already down your career path or not.
Right. And I mean, I obviously lucky and privileged to be able to do that. It was 2 attorneys living together with no children, and we lived in a tiny little apartment in East Nashville, and so we kept our expenses down in order to do this. But that was a very privileged thing for me to be able to do. But I think the concept of looking around and going, well, what is it that I just love to do? What actually brings me joy? And kind of like letting that hobby direct you.
Yeah. By the way, I totally remember those fancy calculators that we had in school. I wasn't doing anything exciting with them, but I just mostly remember my parents are like, why do you need a calculator that's $110 when you're in whatever middle school, high school.
Oh yeah, I couldn't do anything else on them. I couldn't do, like the functions and things like that. I couldn't do the actual math that you were supposed to do, but I could program it to say, funny things and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, those things now they're nothing compared to our phones or all that.
Yeah. And that is actually a perfect segue to my next question about advancements in technology and legal tech, because you've been consulting in this space for a while now, the better part of a decade. So, I mean, there's been tons of advancement during that time. So if you can think back to what it was like when you first started consulting or helping your friends implement some of these things versus what it's like now, kind of take us through that journey a little bit.
Oh, that's fun. I don't get to do that very much. When I first kind of stepped out of practicing and went into trying to create things that were, legal tech based, I started trying to automate documents in a more advanced way. We have automated documents that are essentially mail merge, which is great. And if you think of it as mail merge, it's like I'm taking this information from a database and just putting it into this form field, and all the variables are kind of filling in. And that's wonderful for templates, for creating things that are relatively simple and straightforward, and things that are kind of static. The document is static. It's not variable in and of itself. But I started toying with this idea of being able to deliver a document back to somebody based on what conditional formatting, what questions they asked, or what answers they had to questions that I asked. And back then, Gavel and LawYaw and all of these kind of more complex, non-low code sort of products didn't exist. And so I'm writing this on my website and, having to learn various forms of PHP and different libraries that would let me write directly to a PDF in order to deliver. The thing I was trying to deliver was a lease, a standard lease document to somebody that came to the website. And I just remember how long it took me to create this thing, to build it, to work out all the kinks and the bugs. And now you can go to Gavel and you can do way more than that. You can go to these products and really just kind of dream in a way. You don't have to sit there. Like I had to go to my uncle and be like, I need to learn PHP. I need to learn about various databases and things like that, and because he was a programmer, and he just hands me this giant book for like this giant manual for various things. So I'm like, I'm not reading this, but I mean, I kind of did. But you don't have to do that with Gavel. So the advancement to me is less about the actual technology, more about kind of the concept. We are now able to deliver kind of productization of our legal services. Like that was the idea. I was trying to create a product that was my legal service, and what I knew was landlord tenant. And so I said, okay, well, I can make a lease, a very simple lease. And it was a very simple lease. Never actually sold any of them, but just kind of going through the process was interesting. But now you can get a product like this, and you can productize so many things in your office and compete with LegalZoom and make something better than LegalZoom. LegalZoom is its own thing. It's a good product. People obviously want it. We can kind of individually do that now. And so yes, AI is the giant gorilla, the 800-pound gorilla in the room. But that's the fascinating thing to me now, is this kind of giving attorneys this ability to sell law in such a different way now.
For sure. That's such a good way to put it. And I mean, if you think about kind of where the mind of consumers and clients are, I think it can be a little bit more straightforward, right, to purchase a product versus purchase a service that you're not really sure how many hours you're going to bill. You're not really sure what's going on the back end, which is why LegalZoom in part has been so successful. So yeah, lots of opportunity there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I want to transition to some specifics on legal tech. So I think most lawyers and law firms are sort of doing the best that they can with tech. I mean, there are always
Yeah.
outliers on all sides, but for the vast majority, they have a few solutions implemented, they update them occasionally. In your time working in this space, what are some of the sort of common themes, the common gaps that you see in technology? Like what are the most common pieces that are missing, and how can lawyers go about fixing that?
Ooh, that's awesome. I've got two answers for that because it's kind of two-pronged there. And I'll give a really short one first. The thing lawyers are missing is project management software. Like actual project management software, Teamwork, Monday, Asana, Trello, things like that. We tend to think that we should work either directly out of our email, and that's going to tell us the tasks that need to happen today, or the guts of what our legal tech stack is this law practice management software, your Clios, your MyCases, your Cosmolexes and things like that. And these are great, and you should be using something like that. But stepping outside of that, our law firm does more than just serve clients. We pay bills. We have HR issues. We have to order water. And if you just use the task management inside that law practice management software, then you're not going to be able to do those things. If we take a step out of it, I think that most of our practices should be driven from project management software as opposed to anything else. So that's kind of the answer to the first thing of like what I think is missing in most people's legal tech stack, really. The thing that I think is the most common, and I'm doing kind of air quotes of error, is we tend to chase the shiny object. People that say, oh man, I'm really into legal tech are really into legal tech. They're like, they want to see what the new thing is. And that's super cool as a hobby, but our company's legal tech stack should be driven from our processes. It should be driven from a need. If someone says, Zach, how can I use this AI tool in my office? I usually tell them that's the wrong question because I don't know. I don't care how you can use that AI tool in your office. I care how anything can solve this specific problem for you. What are your processes? What is it that you do in your office? And then go find the technology that manages those specific features, those specific things that you need in your office, instead of kind of chasing down the really, really fun, really, really neat, shiny objects that are right now artificial intelligence tools, which go look at them, go play with them. Great. But don't think of that as time that you're working on your company, really.
Okay, that's a great answer. So on that note, a pillar of this podcast is storytelling. So I wanted to ask, during all of your years consulting, working with different firms, you must have seen some pretty terrible setups at law firms over the years. So does anything come to mind, any horror stories that you can share with us without outing anyone, obviously?
Yeah, I know a lot of people that are not paperless, and they should be. Now there are some things that require paper, where as lawyers a lot of times we're just glorified clerks. We're just pushing paper. But if your paper is something that really could just be in a database, then that's kind of problematic. If you're just doing it because you're like, this is the way that I know. And so I've seen a lot of people that are using database software, that are using law practice management software, but the majority of their client files and client information and case information is actually on paper somewhere in there, in a giant room of file cabinets. And the problem with that is that 10 years ago, we could potentially say that was reasonable. that, okay, I'm going to have this in physical form because I don't know exactly how I need to protect this, or duplicating or triplicating this information digitally is moderately expensive. And so I'm going to have it in physical form because that's how I know. Now, I would say that that's unreasonable to only have your client's information in one place, and it's in one physical place that could potentially get flooded or have a fire or something like that. And so I still, to this day, see a lot of people that are not only not fully paperless, but really, really just paper based.
And I am also just thinking through, as you were saying, that the learning curve for some of the younger attorneys or clerks that they're bringing in. I mean, the Gen Z might have never used a printer before, might have never made a copy before. So.
Okay, so I love that concept because I coach high school cross country and track, and so I see at a very very at a tiny little private school here in Memphis, and the kids that I coach are very bright. I mean, they're way smarter than I am. Thankfully, I'm just coaching them on running instead of actual academics. They are at most, well, probably 7 years away from being lawyers, some of them. And some of them are going to be lawyers. And they've never used Word. They use Google Docs. They don't print things. They email things. They don't even email things anymore. They get things from, particular direct messages. So I like to keep in mind that generation that is so far removed from the, even the electric typewriter, from the fax machine, from all this stuff that we still use potentially in our offices, they have no idea that really is a thing. And that's 7 years from now. And that's the blink of an eye for us.
That is wild to think, because it seems like just yesterday I graduated law school, even though it was 10 years ago at this point.
Feel
and
the
now
same way, yeah.
time flies. It's scary. All right, moving on. We got into this a little bit earlier, but wanted to get in a little deeper. A question that comes up in legal tech is small versus big law firm, and how to find the right size technology, the right solution for them. Because, not to overgeneralize, but I sort of get the impression that small firms think they can't really afford fancy tools, or they don't need all the features. And then big firms think that small companies can't accommodate everything that they need. So they only look at sort of the big established players. And you mentioned before kind of trying to solve problems, but can you expand on that a little bit, and how firms should really be evaluating a particular tool?
Yeah. So most of my personal experiences with smaller firms, because I ran a smaller firm, and I've never personally worked at a big firm or in corporate or anything like that. My wife does. And then I have, a decent bit of interaction with that. But I think fundamentally the idea of how to kind of approach your technology is the same, is that it's, nobody wants to do the grunt work of figuring out how you do the grunt work, of writing down what it is that we do. And so whether you're a small firm or a large firm, or even a corporate, legal department, writing down the processes of how you do things is massively valuable, because you're either going to have turnover, or you need to hire, or you need to figure out what, does this product do this thing? Because we have a tendency to buy a product. Somebody has sold us on the fact that it does this thing, whatever it is, this shiny thing. And so we bought it. And now you've got to figure out how it fits into the rest of your stuff. And so we wind up, small firm, large firm, we wind up with duplicative things all the time. We're not streamlined, which is okay. That's okay in kind of like phase one of your legal tech journey. Like, get the shit to do the things. Like, I don't care if it's duplicative. But when you're really starting to figure out how to do it, you need to, kind of know what does all your stuff. So it's tough to tell people to do this, but you need somebody that can do an audit of your technology. I say every 4 months. I'd say if you're doing it once a year, that's probably a little bit too long. whether you're a large firm or small firm, you need to be going in and saying, how does our technology, how does what we're spending our money on kind of fit into what it is we do? Because we might change what it is we do as we go. And so having somebody delineated, having somebody kind of that is specifically supposed to do that audit and knows how to do that audit and knows what also, like in both types of firms, sometimes we don't even know what all stuff we're paying for. What we'll have 14 different types of e-signature software, which is okay, because sometimes it's cheaper just to grab new software than to figure out where your password is. But that's the thing, is that there's just, we don't, what is it Abraham Lincoln said? If he's gonna cut down a tree, he's gonna spend, and has an hour to do it, he's gonna spend the first 45 minutes sharpening the axe. We don't take the time to sharpen our axe a lot of times.
And I mean, you would think that would be kind of a logical step to take with the audit, because firms do conflict checks. They have processes in place around routinely doing that. Financial audits, most firms hopefully are routinely doing that. So makes sense to do a legal tech audit as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I have to ask you about AI. We cannot have a legal tech expert on in 2025 without asking about that. But hopefully this is like open-ended enough that it's not boring, because everyone's talking about AI. So if you were a partner at a law firm today, what would you be doing right now on the AI front to get ahead?
Ooh, so I would be teaching my staff how to use specific artificial intelligence tools that would be like LLMs or something like that, how to use them to enhance what I do, and specifically how to use them as what I think Jeff Woods calls the thought partner. There's a book, The AI Driven Leader, and being able to wield artificial intelligence to expand what I know, to expand how I can do something, to kind of like check what I'm doing, would be the way that I would do it, is start to get your people comfortable with using something like ChatGPT or Copilot to ask it questions in order to enhance how you go about doing your work day to day.
Okay, it seems reasonable to implement. So on the other side of that, one of the things I like about your work is you often sort of return back to basics. So for example, on your podcast a few months ago, there was an episode about tech things that lawyers should know but are too afraid to ask. And one of those things was digital security, for example. So for anyone listening who doesn't know where to start but is too afraid to ask, what are the basics? It could be on digital security or anything else. Lawyers, that things they should know but are too afraid to ask.
Yeah. So digital security is it's simple and it's complex. Obviously, it's kind of like what we do with all things as lawyers. It depends, but I think of digital security as kind of an access thing. You have to protect things as they're moving from place to place. So if you've got things going from one place to another, email, text message, carrier pigeon, whatever it is, you need to protect it as it's moving. And so typically it needs to be encrypted somehow. So when you're thinking about your digital security, think about, okay, is it protected as it's moving? All right, that's step one. Step two is it protected as it's sitting there? As it's just sitting on your computer or, on your whiteboard or whatever. And I say that kind of jokingly, but I mean that, is it protected? Are you keeping somebody from looking at the files on your desk? Like, is somebody able to read it, really, is the thing. So that's the kind of like encryption in transit while it's moving and encryption at rest. And then the next thing is really, can somebody, that's protecting it from somebody that doesn't have access to it, that doesn't have authorized access. And so the other question then is, am I protecting the authorized access? Am I keeping people from being able to get authorized access? And that's just a password sort of user access issue. Are you using complex passwords? Are you using appropriately complex passwords? And then secondly, are you using two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication? So if somebody does know your password, I've always wanted to do a CLE where I stand there and I say, here is the password to my email address, and see if somebody can get in, because I have multi-factor authentication. They shouldn't be able to get in. I haven't had the guts to do it yet, but the idea is, even if somebody does have your password, you still have a moment to say, no, don't let them in, because it's something you know. This is the two factors, something you know, which is the password, and then something that you have, which is your phone typically. And so is this thing encrypted while it's moving? Is it encrypted while it's sitting there? And then am I keeping people out of it appropriately? That's for our purposes, for the day-to-day user. I mean, that's the main parts of digital security right there.
We'll pause for a quick break. When we come back, we'll cover the why behind selecting tech tools for a law practice and how technology is impacting lawyer burnout.
Deploying new software technology can disrupt familiar workflows and processes, and it often comes with a steep learning curve for the employees in your law firm. We get it, but it doesn't have to be that way. Allrise is a comprehensive law practice management system deeply integrated with the Microsoft tools and technology you're already familiar with, so no steep learning curve is required. And because Allrise is a modular software platform, you can deploy only the specific capabilities you need when you need them. Your choice. If you want to streamline internal operations, boost staff productivity, and deliver superior client service, then take a close look at the AI-powered Allrise platform. It's time to experience software innovation that enables practice excellence. Learn more at allrise.ai.
So you are obviously very deep in the legal tech space, but you also cover broader issues. And something that you've covered in the past is this concept of lawyer burnout and even topics like high functioning depression among lawyers. So I wanted to bring tech into that topic in question and ask if technology can help solve the problems of burnout, or are we just seeing lawyers become more efficient, but then still taking on too much work and technology isn't really a fix here?
Oh, so that's fascinating. Okay, so first thing, I love talking about mental health, because I think that's the only way that we're going to get more people to get access to mental health help for themselves. You know, it's like working out. You know, I think anybody could work on their mental health. So thank you for asking this question. But it is interesting. It's like, does technology help us do that? It can and it can't. I mean, like I think technology, for the most part, it can just exacerbates things. If you automate something, and you automate something that is crap, if you automate a process that is terrible, you've just made yourself do terrible processes faster. So cool. Now you can do more terrible things. You can make more horrible client emails or something. I don't know. And artificial intelligence is actually exacerbating that even more, you know, and saying, oh, well, now I can really, really quickly do terrible research. So it can exacerbate bad things, but on the other side of kind of like, how can it help? It can also make good things better. You know, if you're able to do more with less, if you're able to say, you know, okay, well, I'm going to get away from the billable hour and I'm going to do, alternative fees, or I'm going to sell productization of my services, and I can do more with less actual physical time. Well, maybe I can take some time at the beginning of my day or at the end of my day for me. I can take more me time and still live the life that I want to live, because, you know, a lot of this stuff is a balance of how much time do I have in the day to, personally, I do a lot of crossword puzzles, or I run, or I do woodworking or something like that. How much time in the day do I have to do that stuff versus how much time in the day do I have to help actual clients? And, you know, most of us didn't get into practicing law because we don't want to help people. At the end of the day, like whatever the public thinks of us, most lawyers I've talked to want to help people. And so if you can help more people by, I don't want to say doing less because you're still doing a lot, but by physically doing less, well, then you can potentially take care of yourself a little bit more.
For sure. Yeah, and thank you for covering that topic with your platform, because I think you're right. Not a ton of people in this industry talk about mental health for lawyers, and I see some firms, taking steps to prioritize that, and I think they're going to have to with the expectations of the younger generations, but there's still work to be done for sure. So last question, I want to give you the crystal ball question, just totally open-ended. What will legal tech look like in your mind 5-10 years from now?
Oh man, that's fun. So in a lot of ways, it'll be the same, right? We move information from place to place. That's been the same since the invention of the printing press, which I kind of think of as one of the original legal tech, things. So, yeah, we're just kind of like moving things place to place. But I'm hoping, in a hopeful crystal ball sort of way, that we will be able to kind of re-envision how we deliver and interact with solving legal problems. And so instead of thinking of how do I do better at my job right now? How do I do better at writing this brief? How do I do better at filing this case? The question I hope that we'll start to continue to solve is how do I do better at serving this client? Getting them help for what they're doing. And I've heard some really interesting things like crowdsourcing cases, so you instead of 12 jurors, we have 150,000 people, and we just crowdsource it. Well, that's fascinating to think about, because like what's keeping us from doing that? Why is that fundamentally flawed? I don't know, but I'd love for us to kind of like think down that path. And so I think there's a place for us to kind of automate more things and bring in more data and bring in more information and be able to add the ability to serve more people in what they don't even necessarily know is a legal problem, but kind of solving the problem better instead of doing the thing that we do better, like write a brief or something like that.
The crowdsourcing jury is a new one to me. I've not heard that one yet, but yeah, it's a fascinating thought experiment.
And if you're doing alternative dispute resolution, I can see where that would actually, sit. If we're we've contracted to use this service that is just gonna, send out and pay people 37 cents for their opinion on whether or not I am owed $1,000 by this painting company or something like that. That's okay. I could see that. I mean, it's in civil stuff and criminal stuff, it gets a little bit dicier.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Zack, thank you so much for being here. What is the best way for listeners to follow you or learn more about your work?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. They can always find me at lawyerist.com. They can always find us at the Lawyerist podcast, and you can always email me at Zack, Z-A-C-K, @lawyerist.com. I'm always happy to talk to people.
Thanks again, Zack, and thank you all for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening, and join us again for another Rule of Law podcast from All Rise.